Hi everyone, welcome to We Belong Education podcast. Today it's me and Helen. Helen, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? But I think we need to just start that recording again with a new introduction because you have a new title, Mr.
Oh
Malviya. What
yes,
is
I
it?
do. Doctor Saurabh Malviya.
Doctor. He is a doctor. Let's give him a round of
Yeah, thank you, thank
applause.
you. If you're driving your car, keep your hands on the wheel. It's fine. We can you can clap afterwards. But yes, there is a lot of first times, like
hmm
introducing myself, first
hmm
time receiving email.
Yeah.
Some people have played as a joke. I mean, not as a joke, as in making fun of me, but they
hmm
know that I would like to see that. So they are
hmm
writing an email or a text message. So
Yeah.
it hasn't sunk in yet because it's just this week, right? So,
And
and
it's been a long time coming. For quite a while, we have jokingly called you almost Dr. Malvia, but now you're officially.
uh,
Anyone that follows any of our social media, you would have seen quite a few posts here and there of us celebrating because
mm.
I'm excited for you, and I didn't even do all that work. So, I mean. Because let's just jump right into questions for today. Your hot seat question for today is now you've done this epic thing of finished
Mhm,
a PhD,
mhm.
what is in your future? How are you going to fill your time? So much free time.
Yeah, so much free time. Um, because it's so new still, I don't think that it hasn't sunk in yet. So I don't know what to expect or do
Mm,
with that. And secondly, I have been asked this question on like the thread, uh,
mm,
the comments section, and I haven't replied yet because it is something that I have been contemplating myself. But
mm,
also prior to having done this, people have asked me, "What would you do after?" And the answer, and I don't think it's an answer that people expect. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Because
mm-hmm,
let's say if I when I was teaching at uni, it was a pathway to
mm,
get promotion,
yeah,
right? So from a lecturer to senior lecturer, from senior lecturer to if you bring enough funding, then you become associate professor, professor, all of that kind of thing, and
mm,
other things associated with it. But since I started We Belong in 2019, I'm living my dream anyway. So it's not that after my doctorate I'll stop doing what I was doing.
mm,
So maybe it all depends upon who approaches me. If there are
mm,
different people asking for different things, yes, we will
mm,
do it. There's no
yeah,
no to it. We will
yeah,
explore that. But from my context, I wasn't doing PhD for promotion anyways.
mm,
I had, professionally speaking, I think I'm the luckiest person out there. I don't envy anyone. So I feel like I don't need to do, there's nothing in the future. Everything is just like business. So this PhD was more like an academic um, acknowledgement that
mm-hmm,
I began, and it has definitely advised me, informed me, educated me on so many things that I already incorporate in my consultancy.
mm,
So maybe if there is a platform to share with more people, yes. But
mm-hmm,
otherwise, there is no new door that I was looking at and thinking, after my doctorate, I'll do this. There's no such thing. So, with all the free time that you ask, it is quite interesting. Yes, there are some evenings already this week that I have sat in front of the television thinking, there is no reason for me to stop this now. I can continue episode two or episode three. Or if when I've gone out for a walk with my dogs, if my dog pulls me towards a different street, I'm not like, let's go back. I have to be home. I'm like, all right, if you want to go to that street, we'll go there. So the
mm,
walks are a bit longer.
yeah,
And I'm a bit more mindful of normal things instead of running back to the screen. Do you think I've answered your question, or is it still? I think this answer is still in. in
It may
developmental
evolve. It
phase.
may evolve because we literally you only did find out this week.
Yeah.
We're recording in the same week that you found out. So, you know, it may not have sunk in that, you know, so,
Mhm.
that thing that's taken up so much of your life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Almost a decade.
Mm,
There were some complications. The topic changed,
mm,
the faculty changed,
mm,
professors moving to different universities. So I
mm.
didn't change my university, but my professors, my
Yeah,
supervisors did. So a few things did change. But in the last three years, things had been consistent. So the result.
yeah,
And COVID happened. And
amazing.
like, I mean, it's a big part of my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It's in developmental phase. That's what I think. Maybe ask me this question again in the next podcast. But yeah, I'm very happy about that. So,
Mm.
hmm.
So here we are. It's the We Belong podcast with Dr. Malviya and co-host Helen.
Yes, yes, and we are hearing really good feedback also, Helen. Like we are getting emails uh, from listeners asking us
Mm,
question. And today's topic is although we had already decided on today's topic, kind of the one of the listeners have actually mentioned similar points that
mm,
they would love to hear
mm-hmm,
for herself and for her team, which is so nice. So, for our listeners, this topic, this session, we were going to focus on understanding children's behavior. Am I
mm-hmm.
saying it right, Helen? Or is that something else that you would have named this session?
I think understanding, we'll also discuss behavior as communication, but
Oh, yes.
we will go down the road and see where we end up.
Okay.
So you mentioned that someone had messaged you. Do you want to let us know what was her question? What is she asking?
Okay, so one of the it's from one of our listeners, Anika. Anika says, I'm reading it verbatim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
Do you have any advice for having conversation with parents of children who display very unsafe or disrespectful behaviors, but
mm-hmm,
the parent doesn't believe that their child could be at fault in any way?
mm-hmm.
Now there
So
are, yeah, go on, Helen.
well, I just find it really funny that because you only just let me know that you had got this message just before we jumped into record.
Yes.
And for those that don't know, We Belong podcast is now on TikTok. We're
Okay.
not very good at it because we're old, so I need to ask my kids for advice. But we're on TikTok, and I'd actually seen this for a while, but I just saw it again because I've been on TikTok a little bit more, trying to work out how it works. What do we
Hmm.
post? Who knows? I don't know. But I saw this one and it made me think. I'm just going to read it to you. It says, working in childcare, when you mention some unwanted behavior to a parent on pickup and they say, oh, they did not sorry, oh, they don't do that at home.
Yeah. Hmm.
And that I got a couple of thoughts on that, and that kind of ties into the question that you've received,
Hmm.
the asking, you know, how do you talk with parents? I first want to address it as a parent of a child of additional needs who has actually said, I have not seen that behavior because I've said it. Um,
Because you've said it. Yes,
well, no,
you.
I have. I've
She's one
said
of
it.
them.
I
She's one of
one
them.
time I had an educator um, list a whole lot of behaviors that they'd
Hmm.
witnessed. And
Hmm.
I literally said, I said, the child you're describing to me is not a child I've seen.
Hmm.
I've said it.
Hmm.
But also on the flip side, I've also been the educator for long in the day when I first started, who said to my team, "Oh, as if she hasn't seen this at home." But
Yeah.
now, what do I know as a parent of children with differing needs?
Hmm.
Um, Often at home, our homes are sensory safe spaces. And whether you know you've done that or not, because we know sometimes as well with parents, it's a journey. There's no diagnosis yet.
Hmm.
But from the day that child is born, you're adjusting, you're learning, you know what those triggers are. And
Yeah.
so for my particular child, it was such a sensory safe space at home, we actually didn't see what it was they were talking about.
Yeah.
And so I suppose that brings me into how do you have these conversations with parents? I think as educators, we need to acknowledge that it's a journey. And
Mm.
I'd sometimes you can't just come in hot and be like, this is what's happened. Now give us an answer, because often the parents don't know what the answer is either. And
Mm.
also, if they're at the very beginning of that diagnosis journey, um, that like it really is a journey. There's some mourning in there. You know, you have to, as a parent with of a child of additional needs, you need to kind of mourn the life and the child you thought you were going to
Hmm.
have. A lot of therapy goes on.
Hmm.
You know, you're looking for a whole lot of different allied health professionals. It really is a journey. So I think my first point of advice is just acknowledge that this is a journey, and just as educators we have to form relationships with our children, you also have to form a trusting relationship with that parent.
Mm.
It's not an instantaneous thing, and I think the more you build that trust with the parent, the more open they'll be to work with you and actually have those conversations.
Yeah. I have a very what can I say, a take which touches your domain but has a
Hmm.
different way of
Yeah.
understanding it and therefore
Mm,
approaching it. But before
mm,
I go into my uh, kind of view or opinion on it, I wanted
mm,
to hash what you've said.
mm,
But I might not do justice to what you've said.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
So please correct me. I'll go back. I'll start with the fact that you mentioned something about trust.
Yes.
Now, when a parent doesn't believe in what you're saying,
Mm,
so is it a denial? So let's go start with denial.
mm,
Lack of trust could create deniability, right?
mm,
So let's say I am a parent and you tell me something about my dog,
mm,
and
mm,
my dog doesn't do that at home. So I would, if I trust you though, that means if you and I have made connections for the last 3 months or 2 months, we've been making connections, right?
mm,
Now, it's not just your job to make connection with me. I should also be willing, open to make connections with you.
mm,
Many times, educators are struggling to make connections
mm,
because parents often don't have time while signing in or signing their kids out.
mm. Yeah.
So I absolutely appreciate that when you hear from someone such as us saying make connection, you go, when? Yeah. So I appreciate that. But there are ways we can make connection. Newsletter is one of the ways.
Mm,
Sending emails is one of the ways. Also
mm,
showing parents efforts that you are making. For example, if you are listening to this podcast, if you are, and it is
mm,
about behavior, why don't you
mm,
send an email to all the parents with the link of this podcast and
mm,
say, we listen to these podcasts as our professional development, right?
mm,
Or if you have listened to something else, then send that. So parents go, uh, there is some sort of connection which is building trust in
mm.
your professional outlook, I guess. Yeah.
I
So
often
let's.
I often say with brand new educators, like really new educators, when they're kind of struggling with, well, one, they're learning how to communicate with parents, and you know, how do you have these tough conversations?
Mm,
And a very beginning tip, and this, you know, our listeners may say, "Oh, Helen, that's so simplistic," but this is about we're talking about building relationships and how do you get there.
yeah.
I often say to my educators, sometimes remember the language you use.
Mm,
When a parent comes in and you want to have a conversation with them about some behaviors that you've witnessed today, simply by saying, "We had a bad day,"
mm,
acknowledges that as a group we had a bad day. It's not that accusatory, your child did this today, which already
mhm.
puts that parent on the back foot. But
Yeah.
also the reason I like to say we had a bad day is because sometimes we need to consider, did my actions play a part in how this child behaved today?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I've had to reflect on my actions and realize, oh, actually, possibly I triggered that child
Mhm.
by doing that thing, or
Yeah.
the room was overstimulating today, and
Mm,
that contributed to the child's behavior. And
mhm.
sometimes just that simple acknowledgement of we had a bad day, the parent then is more open to having those
Yeah.
conversations.
You're, I think that you and I are approaching a similar outcome,
Mm,
openness of a parent.
mm,
Yeah. Because we are looking for building trust.
mm,
So I'm going to go back to even if the language, because let's face it, in our sector, we have people from English as second languages, and many times they feel maybe because of language difference, I
mm,
should not approach. Because if a
mm,
parent is already angry and they go 3 or 4 sentences fast, I'm taking time to comprehend what you just said. So
mm,
I have now forgotten Helen's advice on use we or
mm,
us or
mm,
our,
mm,
right? So if I go back to the building trust thing, for the same outcome, openness. So
mm,
I believe that the trust thing is it's so dynamic that every service will have a different way of building trust. Yeah.
Mm,
Let's forget about building trust. Let's because trust is an outcome of connection. So let's
mm,
say building connection. So
yep.
you build connection through newsletters, through information, through saying hello to the parents,
Mm,
and asking for feedback, written or do a survey, all those
mm,
kind of things. Yeah.
mm, mm.
And also, children, when they go home, they say something about you. So that also builds, it's not just being
And
nice.
sometimes it's not true.
But think about this. What if you are putting a lot of attention on building trust with parents, but you've
Mm,
forgotten about connection with children? So they're like,
yeah.
that Saurabh, he's such a bad guy. And then, so let's say parents come to pick the kids up, you
Mm,
said something and you missaid it. Put
mm,
it this way, you didn't even say Helen's advice on us, we are. You didn't
mm,
use collective. You were
mm, mm,
so accusatory.
mm,
Maybe because of you came across as accusatory because of language difference, or you came across as accusatory because you were having a bad day, whatever that may be. So you
mm,
did. Okay. But if for the last 3 months trust was being built, the parent would still be open. In fact, the parent would say, wow, he doesn't do that at home. What happened, Helen? Because I trust you. Tell me
mm,
more. What's going on? Because
mm,
I'm not very much intrigued. I'm not believing in you, but I'm intrigued at what you're saying.
mm,
I still don't. I still have a hard time to believe that what you're saying, but I'm intrigued because
mm.
although I don't have a child, I have this Chihuahua Pomeranian, and once my neighbor complained that he was barking more, and I got this information through an email,
Mm,
a letter
mm.
that get rid of the dog or in 10 days or something like that, 30 days or something. And then instead of going, oh, I'm intrigued, I was absolutely angry. I'm like, how dare you? The
Yeah.
outcome of that is that I ended up selling that townhouse and I bought a house so that so
So
because of
you
my
didn't have to
dog,
deal with
I
it.
bought a house so that I don't have to deal with the neighbors. Um, but anyways, parents can come from different angle, and I see that many educators go through this as if they have to make connection. And you're right. Sometimes it feels like we're doing everything,
Mm,
and then parents aren't even open to it.
mm.
So there are layers of creating communication channels. But
And
if
I
we
think,
haven't, sorry, Helen.
oh no, I was just gonna say, I think it's really important. Like, it's so nuanced. Whatever
Mhm.
we touch on today, it's not even going to be the tip of the iceberg in like behaviors and how we work with families,
Yeah.
to work together.
Hmm.
Because it is so nuanced. There's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
gamut. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But we think you can start somewhere from this podcast. I
yes, yeah.
think let's look at, so when you go back to your office today, or if you're in the office, write down
Mm,
the word connection. Then you
mm,
explore the ways to make connection, because then connection becomes the conduit of communication.
mm,
So when you have a connection with someone, even if English is your second language, you're communicating. Like when my mom comes, she has not learned English, but she has more friends in Australia than I do. More people visit my home when my mom is here than when my mom is not here from India.
yeah.
And and they all come for food, we all know that. But
She's a really good cook.
yeah, because she's so connected. And now
Yeah,
she uses Facebook from India, and
yeah,
she's like liking posts of my friends also. She's not commenting a lot on that, but she's liking it because she sees the photo.
yeah.
Now, because of that connection, now that acts as a conduit, like a
Mm,
pipeline of
mm,
communication. So, and if it could be good communication, could be bad, could be favorable, could be undesirable, but you're communicating. So, why don't you go to the office and write connection?
mm,
If I want to tell parents something, I need to be connected. And
mm,
then your team might have better ideas than we do, because as
mm.
Ellen has already said, I think for herself that we are getting old. So your your team might have better ideas on how to stay in touch with the community.
Yeah.
Once you've done that, then we will touch the first spaces, talking to parents. Now,
Mm,
we'll we'll talk about my bit on what happens afterwards. But Helen,
mm.
how is this going so far?
No, I agree with you. Um and just impress on that bit about the journey you take with your parents. And I've got another story. I had this one child, they were new
Hmm.
and showing some quite undesirable behaviors. It was happening every day. And the first few conversations was that we don't see this at home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, but just by having those conversations, trying to remain quite even, because
Mm-hmm.
we don't know what's going on in their lives. I think we got to that trusted point with that parent, and then she said to me, because I started to track. I wanted that data. I started to
Yeah.
track what time things were happening, who was involved before, what was happening after, because I
Mm-hmm.
really wanted a comprehensive view of what was going on for this child. Why are we seeing this really escalated
Mm-hmm.
behavior? And so I got to the point where I had some pretty good data. I said to the mother one day, I said, "Look, I just need to share with you. I've been kind of tracking what's been going on to try and get a deeper understanding of, is there something happening before we see the behavior that's triggering the behavior? What's happening after? What are we seeing?"
Mm-hmm.
And I got my tracking down to every day about 2 o'clock. We were seeing this particular behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then she said, "I'm really embarrassed and I need to tell you something." And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"What is it?" She said, "He has ADHD and we haven't told you because I was scared that you wouldn't take him.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 o'clock is probably when his meds are wearing off."
Yeah.
And that to me is heartbreaking, that also we need to acknowledge as educators that sometimes parents are so stressed because we know they need to go to work, they need to support
Mm-hmm.
their families, but then to add in a fear that they can't be open and honest with us because we'll say no, because they've heard nightmare horror stories within our industry
Mm-hmm.
that, once you acknowledge that there's a behavior issue or there's a diagnosis, that
Yeah.
they'll get a flat out no. And I've
Yeah.
heard that story over and over again where parents have been concerned to be upfront about their child's diagnosis. And that's what the thing, it's so nuanced, and hopefully, building those relationships can get you to the point where we can have open and honest conversations. And honestly, once we worked it out, that was great. We started administering the meds at the service and he was having much more successful afternoons.
And so, Helen, think about this. That you and I went about a different way, though, because the
Mm,
first point I had written when you were talking about this was shame. The
mm,
first point, when parents deny
mm,
that it doesn't happen at home, one of the factors is shame.
mm,
For those, for our listeners, we will rehash all of this so you can kind of create this, you can connect the dots. We don't know which dot you are going to be impacted by the most.
mm,
Yeah. But it could be one, chances are it is one of them. So
mm,
when somebody says this doesn't happen at home,
mm,
there is a factor of shame. It could be that they're denying that it doesn't happen at home
mm,
because they don't want to believe that that is what their child did today. And
mm,
it's the feeling of shame is so strong. However, if Helen, you and I have been communicating for 3 months, which
mm,
happened in your case, that you
mm,
showed to the parent that, hey, look, you know what? I'm still figuring it out. I'm making these efforts. What is it? Hey, this is my data. What do you think? What do you think? And then the
mm,
parent, because of that, again, connection, trust, and communication, that
mm,
eventually came up and said, and she knew that she would be accepted if when she said what she said to you. Yeah.
mm.
So that happened. And if it hadn't occurred, she might still be denying it to say that never happens.
I mean,
Um,
I
mm,
mean, just to like again, I'm going to share as the parent flip side. Um, I genuinely hadn't seen the behaviors at home that they were discussing.
okay, as
Like
a
my
parent.
son
Mhm.
would not dream of speaking to me the way they were saying that he was
Yeah.
speaking.
Hmm.
But I will admit that in the journey to diagnosis, sometimes as a parent you compartmentalize things because it's the way you can deal and handle things. And
Okay.
sometimes I think once we'd had that diagnosis, then I could look back and reflect and go, oh, actually, that particular thing I saw or that thing that they used to do, that that's actually that should have been assigned to me. But
Right.
sometimes as
Mm-hmm.
a parent, like I said, there's a whole grieving process in there.
Mm-hmm.
On that journey to diagnosis, sometimes you compartmentalize stuff because it's hard. And that's the other thing. If you're having a hard day at your service with that child, also remember that parent has that child and has those experiences as well. And, if they're
Yeah.
not willing to initially agree that it's happening or be open to have conversations about what's happening,
Yeah.
just remember they are going through it as well. And so,
Okay.
and that's why I'm a real advocate for diagnoses, because sometimes once there's a label, it's easier to talk about. But then also we need to add in the flip side. Diagnosis is expensive, and sometimes parents can't afford to even go down that road. So there's a lot right there in what I just said. But
Well, actually, I've
talk
written
to
it
us,
down.
Dr.
So
Malviya.
I've written some points down and see
Mm,
if we can just connect these dots. Okay. And then I'll talk about something other than all of this. So
mm,
we've got trust, deniability, shame, anger,
mm,
uncertainty,
mm,
and professionalism.
mm,
So let me just write that uncertainty because as I was speaking it, I just came up with you one. So, in absence of connection, now when I say connection, I don't just mean connection that you have with your parents.
mm,
Childcare, OSH, OOSH sector is usually disconnected with the community,
mm,
which has had issues with professionalism, that
mm.
people actually don't believe in you, even if you're saying something really good.
Yeah.
People are also not getting investing in your connection with you because
Mm,
they don't see you as a professional. Okay.
mm,
So professionalism or lack of it in the
mm,
eyes of community, I'm not talking that you're not professional. I'm saying in the eyes of community,
mm.
chances are, even if you're speaking gold, it would
Yeah.
not be heard.
Mm,
When I used to talk to my parents, parents who knew that I also teach at a school heard me differently as compared to the parents who didn't know that I teach at school.
mm.
Parents who knew that,
Yeah.
oh, he teaches at university, he must have something about my child, heard me differently as compared to those who didn't know that I teach at university. Like, who, what does he know about my kid?
Yeah.
So professionalism sometimes can impact that conduit that I'm talking about. But here's what
Mm,
I request. Therefore, it only calls for more action from us
mm,
because you want to become transparent in who you are as
mm,
an educator. So you sending newsletters, emails, putting posters out there about what you are doing and why. Some of
mm,
your critical reflections can also go out to parents to
mm,
say, hey, look, we've been reflecting on the transition and we realized that we were not transitioning that smoothly. And after listening to children's voices and then add in those right words, make perhaps tell your parents, communicate to your parents to go, wow, these guys actually are deep thinkers. And even if they
mm,
don't know what you've studied or not, academically speaking, they would, chances are, not immediately perhaps, but to change a community's perception of your professionalism so that they can trust you and thereby can listen to you when you're talking about child's behavior. It's
mm,
all connected. Um, it's just those efforts because the efforts in the past were not made.
mm.
So you and I are fighting a battle which started many years ago, and
Yes.
we're on the losing side of it. So we want to do more research, more studies, more publications to show that we could be wrong, but we are
Mm,
professional and we are working on it. And
mm,
my diagnosis could be wrong as well. Diagnosis not from the context of diagnosing children, but my diagnosis, sorry, that this child did XYZ could be wrong, but I'm
mm,
a critical thinker. And
mm,
parents would talk to or listen to or engage with a critical thinker a bit
mm.
differently than they would listen to and interact with a child care worker.
Mm. I mean, that's a really interesting. You're talking about how you share information. I mean, you think about a lot if I mean, some services do it really, really well. So please, if you're already doing this, amazing. Like more power to you. I love to hear that people are already doing it. But we know a lot of people's critical reflection is backed in research. We started by reading this particular piece of research,
Mm.
and then therefore that determined that we would do some critical
Yeah,
reflection on
yeah.
point A, B, C. Your
Mhm.
parents don't even know that you're actually, engaging with pieces of research to inform your practice. And so I
Mm.
think, like, hit your nail on the head. If we are trying to also raise how we're seen and our not sorry, we're not raising our professionalism because we're already super professional and our educators are doing amazing jobs. But the optics of professionalism,
Yeah.
you know, though, as you said, sharing that information and building those relationships. Because often, if you I remember one time I had a conversation with someone and I said, I've just read this really interesting article about, and I think it really fits into some of the things we're seeing with this child.
Hmm.
Can I share it with you? And they
Mm.
came back and they said, "Oh my goodness, you're actually right. That hits so
Yes.
many things that we're seeing." So
Hmm.
again, just the way we share what we're doing. Let's
Yeah.
go on a journey together.
So I'm thinking about something, Helen, here, that what you just said to me. Okay, so after this, those who are listening to this, maybe if you have a pen and paper, try to kind of draw a a line, like a timeline of things, and you add the sequence of events which impacts each other. And I think what we are trying to say is, even though what Helen just said to you, that is, um, sharing a piece of research and say, hey, look, I've been looking at this research, da, 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 have a look, if that happened as the first thing, it might not land.
No.
So again, the sequence is connection first,
Mm-hmm.
professionalism, communication second.
Mm,
Or through connection, you communicate who you are. Okay.
mm,
Meanwhile, you're still communicating with parents about misbehavior, undesirable behavior, aggressive behavior. Yeah. And they're not listening to
mm,
you. Yeah. You keep doing it. Don't wait to do it, but keep doing it. Three or
mm,
4 months later, or 3 weeks or 3 days later, don't know, because it depends on who's reading your thing. Yeah. Then comes approaching parents and expecting that they would listen to you.
mm,
You still approach parents, so action will still happen, but the expectation that they would listen to me would happen once the first two things are done.
mm,
Done as in the first two things are have landed. Because if you're sending newsletters and they're not reading newsletters, or they're not reading your research piece of paper, or they're not listening to the podcast that you've sent to them,
mm,
they would not be ready yet for the
mm,
step three, that you hand them a research or you
mm,
tell them something about the kid, because we also have to understand who we are talking to. So we have to understand who we are. So
mm,
sit down with the team and clarify your own identity and what you want to put out as optics, as Helen said. We have to understand who we are talking to, because we are talking to parents, and
mm,
parents don't have manual given to them when the kids come in their lives. Like
mhm.
I say that I'm an accident. Okay, I'm an accident to people. Why? Because my parents didn't plan me.
Yeah.
They were planning for a child, and twins happened, and I'm a younger one of the twins, so I have a joke going around that I'm an accident. So my parents didn't have
You're not
any
an
idea.
accident, you're a bonus.
Oh, maybe. Oh, well, maybe. If you look at my childhood, it did come across as an accident, an extra bonus of responsibilities, I guess. My parents were not ready to have a second child. So
Mm,
now they're dealing with the economic crisis that we had
mm,
at home, and with the stress which came out of it. But when I listen to Anika's message, I
mm,
also see that whilst all of these things, the onus goes back onto the educators,
mm,
I see a sense of uh, unappreciated, that we are unappreciated and unheard.
mm,
When parents are actually denying, so in your case you were denying, because not denying as in it was hard for you to believe because it didn't actually happen at home. It
mm,
wasn't, because he coped, he was so used to being at home and sensory safe
mm,
place, and you gradually grew up with him, so it was hard for you to kind of.
mm,
So how do we communicate? Instead of how do we communicate, which we've been talking about, how about you look at what to communicate? There is a theory called discourse. It is
mm,
spelled as Discourse. I'll
mhm,
repeat that again. Dis, and then course, C-O-U-R-S-E,
mhm.
which talks about power dynamics
Yep.
and the conceptualization of children, as in who the child is
Mm,
discursive in nature. What I mean by discursive in nature is, as the discourse changes, the concept of child changes.
mm,
A child at home is a dependent child to the parent.
mm,
Okay.
mhm,
Now, not he's not the dependency is not the only thing the child is. But a
Mm-hmm.
child at home is dependent on the parent, has his own room, has a different type of powers at
Mm,
home.
mm,
Okay.
mm,
They know what the puppy eyes is at home. They know what mom wants. They know what dad wants. Right.
mm,
When you hear it, don't hear it as they are manipulative. No, 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 no. They're growing up with that information.
mm,
So, for example, a discourse call hospital, let's say, a surgeon in an hospital is the most powerful person because he is a surgeon for hospital.
mm,
But the
mm,
same surgeon, when comes home, he's not a surgeon because the discourse home, he might be someone's son, someone's father, someone's brother. So if
mm.
mom says you can't leave without eating broccoli, that surgeon has no power at home. He has to listen to mom, right?
Yeah.
But the same surgeon, when he is in hospital, he's telling people, take your pills, otherwise I'm not letting you go out of this hospital.
Mm,
So the
mm.
surgeon's power is discursive in nature. He's
Yeah.
not powerful everywhere. He's powerful at hospital, but not
Mm,
powerful at home.
yeah.
I mean, depend upon what is happening at home, but his power is different, let's say, in
Mm,
those two. So, and also the surgeon's identity is discursive. In here,
mm,
he's Mr. Surgeon, Mr. this, Mr. that. At home, he might be called by his pet name, like come over here, do this, do that. Yeah. So a child at a childcare service or an OSH or in a classroom has a different type of identity. It's
mm,
a different type of power, and there's a different type of dynamic. He's not
mm,
engaging with mom, dad, pet, and sibling. He's engaging
mm,
with 14 other children. He's
mm,
engaging with 19 other children. He's engaging with in an oval where educators are so transient that maybe he doesn't even know who this educator is.
mm,
Doesn't know what that is. So in outside school care or long day care, the recent My Time Our Place or EYLF talks about children being an active citizen. Now,
mm,
active citizenship comes with power, or active
mm,
citizenship gives them power. So let's talk about discourse childcare. In
mm,
discourse childcare, the child has power.
mm,
So when he acts out as power, it could come undesirable. It could be misbehavior. It could be pushing an educator to say, go away from me. I don't want to talk.
mm,
Or pushing another child to say, you can't play with us.
mm,
But the same child, like a surgeon going back home, when he goes back home, he's not doing it because A, there are no other 15 people to fight. There
mm,
is no handball place to get to first. Otherwise, if you don't get there, other kids will go and start playing handball. In here,
mm,
if you lose, your sister gives you another turn. Over there, if you lose, people say stand in the line. So you start pushing other kids to get in front of the line.
mm,
So next time when you're communicating to the parent and parent says it doesn't happen at home, you have to say, yes, home dynamic and childcare dynamic are two different dynamics.
mm. We,
And just last word in this, the culture, the peer culture,
mm,
PEER, peer culture, that is how a child sees himself among 10 other children versus a child sees himself with mom, dad, sibling, a pet with his own
mm,
backyard, sees himself. They're two different dynamics. In childcare and school sector, we've got peer culture happening. They have to negotiate with other kids. At home,
mm.
they don't have to deal with peer culture. They have to
Yeah.
deal with family.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
behaviors are different. Helen.
So we spent quite a bit of time talking about the parent educator dynamic and just the
Yeah.
relationship there. And I do believe that building those relationships are a strong start to that. Why does this behavior happen
Mhm.
journey? But I'm very conscious of the fact that the question you got actually asked about, you can remind me if I'm
Mhm.
remembering it
I'm
wrong,
looking at
but it
it
was
now.
about
Yeah.
how can educators respond to the
Mhm.
behavior? Was that it?
Do you have any advice for having conversation with parents of children who display very unsafe and
Uh-huh.
disrespectful behaviors, but the parent doesn't
Okay.
believe?
Also, we have actually discussed that, but I think also it's important, just because like let's give it a holistic view. Um, I would like to maybe discuss a few strategies,
Mhm.
what youth advise educators when you're seeing that undesirable behavior, escalated behavior.
Yep.
Um, what's your advice to educators on how we interact with that child?
So, firstly, with Anika, she had actually given us two other questions, and
Oh,
which kind of
okay.
relate to what you've said.
Mm-hmm.
But before I go over there, I just wanted to um, say the same word again, the discourse, power dynamic, peer culture, these three words
Mm,
again. Write it down when you can, when you get a chance. If you are able to see it, then you can communicate it.
mm,
Don't just say it because you heard it on a podcast
mm,
or a PD class or something. Yeah. Don't
mm.
just say it because the parents is if a parent is informed, they say, "What about this?" And you go, "Oh, I don't know. I just was saying what I heard in the podcast." So that's not going to work. So my advice is to get educated first.
Mm.
Educator is someone who's willing to be educated. Yes, that's what we said in the
I
previous
think I,
podcast.
I think I saw that on someone's social media.
Ah, yeah, I said that. Thanks for following the podcast. Thanks for following the social media page. But when I say get educated, this again sounds like, oh, he's telling me what to do. No, no, I'm trying to help you.
Mm.
15 years ago, I would have said this to a child. Do you do this at home? And they say no. I said, why would you do it here then? Okay.
Or the flip side, I've said to a child, "Do you do this at home?" And they said, "Yeah."
And then I would say, well, this is not your home. So I never lose with that question. Okay.
Yeah.
So did this at home? Then that was 15 years ago. So it
Mm.
took time to realize what is actually happening. So
Mm.
when you see undesirable behavior, like because you just mentioned, sort of what's your approach on undesirable behavior? And therefore, I refrain from saying a strategy because if you do it, it's not going to work or it may work. Chances are it
Mm.
may not work what I'm going to say. Why?
Mm.
Because every dynamic is different.
Yeah.
How do you define an undesirable behavior? So I give an example, which I have been given recently in my professional development recently, where children are sitting down while having food,
Mm.
but they are made to sit as they line up to get food. Now, you and I both know that sitting down while having food, sitting down while having food is kind of an accepted norm. But sitting down, waiting to get to the food, that is sitting down in two lines, is not a norm. It's just more like a disciplinary thing which educators wanted to have at the service. Like, hey, everybody sit down. Those who have food, sit down in two lines. Now, here's
Mm.
the question. Some kids were not sitting down because they
Mm.
were like, we can line up, standing up. Right? Those were year fives and six.
Mm.
Is that an undesirable behavior? Or is it an acceptable behavior, but it just happens to be undesirable because your desires are too strong? Okay.
Well, I think there's already a point that I often talk about with my teams. Um, and not lining up isn't huge in the scheme of things. It's
Mhm,
not throwing chairs. It's not
mhm,
all those kind of really
mhm,
escalated behaviors. But when you as an educator are saying the child is displaying an undesirable behavior or they're being naughty, I hate that
mhm,
word, but
mhm,
they're being naughty. I think the first step, my first bit of advice for an educator would always be you need to first do a little bit of critical reflection on
mhm.
yourself. And we discussed this in the swearing podcast as well,
Yeah.
that think about, why am I reacting to this way? Why do I feel strongly that why do I feel strongly that all children have to sit down in the line? Why can't they stand up? And some of those you're going to critically reflect and get to the point of, we've decided that it's done this way because it's safe. Like,
Mm,
we
mm,
understand you may not change your practice, but
mm,
I think that first port of call is always just reflecting on, why do I think something
mm,
needs to
mm.
be, like I
Yeah.
said, I was at a service a few weeks ago, and there was an educator standing there, just kind of constantly repeating very dryly, "Go down the slide, go down the slide, go down the slide," over and over again. And I said
Yeah.
to her, I walked over to her, I said, "Why do they have to go down the slide? Why can't they go
Mm,
up?" And
mhm,
because I just love throwing little things out, and
mhm,
so
mhm,
she said, "Because they have to." I said, "Yeah, but why?" "Because they have to." So
mm.
for me, straight away, that says to me, think about it a little bit more. And we know sometimes it's because there's too many kids and it's just so
Yeah.
chaotic and someone always falls off. Okay, yeah,
Mm-mm.
you've reflected and you've decided that's the reason why they can only go down.
Yeah.
But if there's three kids and they're safely going up and down, do we really need to tell them only go don't
Yeah.
go up the slide? That's a simple one, but I think that first one, and I think you just talked about it quite a lot in the swearing
Mhm,
podcast, about once you start to understand yourself and why you react certain ways,
mhm.
then it actually helps with you understanding children's behavior.
So, children's behavior, I just want to make sure that the question you and I picked, the first question that you and I picked about communication with parents,
Mm,
and the and the second question being how to approach when you're overstimulated about aggressive behaviors. They're two different podcasts for us, isn't it? Because
yeah.
when you look at, I mean, 20 podcasts to be honest, because it's been 6 years and now I have visited more than 500 services.
Mm,
And I'm telling you, I have not yet scratched the surface about talking about behaviors because every service is so different. It's not a cliche. It's not, oh yeah, every service is unique. No, come with me. Come with take 7 days off. I'll take you to at least 4 services with me. And I will show you how they all are different. Okay. Now, because of that, when I read a question about aggressive behavior, I am left with more question than answers. That
mm,
is, what is the home dynamic? What time your after school care, long day care starts? Are you making them sit for food? Is that why they're becoming more aggressive? Are the medication wearing down? As you just said, the medications are wearing down. What sort of reflections are you doing? So I want to now repeat, oh, sorry, this rehash uh, in particular communication with parents first and see
mm,
if we can actually, you and I can kind of figure out a pathway for our listeners.
mm,
And maybe we won't figure out, but we'll try. And then also look at behaviors, aggressive behaviors as a new podcast, because I'm having some more ideas as we are talking. So
mm-hmm.
these are my collection so far, and I would like to hear from you, Helen, because I've written a few things down. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we are thinking in order to communicate to parents about what happened today. So there are two different. I've drawn two different columns.
Mm,
On the right hand side, left hand side, I've written what happened today. Okay, and on
mm-hmm.
the right hand side, I've written how do I communicate it. Okay,
Mm,
so the what happened is about perspectives.
yep.
That is, you listen to podcasts, you listen to the videos. We have some videos on my page, so please listen to those videos. You've done PD with me, with someone else. Good. So you're now learning. Oh, that was not undesirable. That was my expectations are too high. That was not aggressive behavior. That was survival behavior.
Mm,
Right. So what happened is about learning for a few years, few months. Yes, would you agree with that, Helen? Like,
mm.
what do you think? Before I go into the how, I want to ask you: do you see the same behavior differently as compared to how you saw it when you were new to the sector, and has
Oh,
it gradually changed for you?
look, I've always, you know, the way we grow up, our culture, our family dynamics dictate a lot of who we are, and
Mm,
we learn a lot as we go on. I've
mm,
always been not as over the top with behaviors just due
mm,
to some of my own experiences. But I will say back in the day when I first started, I used to
mm,
try and stand a bit more stronger and be like, you will not do this with me.
mhm,
But I think just learning all I have over many years and looking at why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? I think really life changing for me was when I started to be able to consider why am I reacting this way?
mm. So more,
And
more
start,
like a
but
personal
also
growth
starting
that
to realize
means.
like,
Mm,
whoa, actually, when I did that, when I did A, B happened. So like really
yeah.
realizing what it is, why am I responding this way?
Mhm.
What did I do that maybe got that response? That was pretty life changing for me. But
Yeah.
I mean, I even now I change my practice because every child is different, and as you said,
Mm,
it's hard to give strategies because not one strategy that works in my service isn't going to work at the service down the road.
mhm.
And that's not because that strategy doesn't work. It's just because it doesn't work with that particular child or that particular context of
Dynamic. Yeah.
that service. So that's why, it is a little bit hard to give advice about what you can do. But I think, as I've discussed before, lifelong learner, if I'll often look at if I can't get if I'm still struggling with the behavior, what do
Mm.
I need to go back and learn?
Yeah, there is something I just got out of that, and I'm going to just
Hmm.
add this for another aspect because when you hear or when if I heard you 10 years ago, Helen,
Mm,
reflect, 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 reflect,
mm,
reflect, I would have said, she doesn't know what I'm going through.
mm.
This kid really did hit me.
Oh, a
Yeah.
hundred. Yeah. And I
This
would have
kid
said,
did this on purpose. He
mm.
saw me from a distance and he hit me. I know I don't need to reflect. I have evidence for it. And I so
And
is it
even I probably would have said that crazy lady on that We Belong podcast
what
said
does
that
she know?
I need to think about what am I doing to trigger the child. The child
Yeah.
should be listening to me because that's respectful.
Or you can say that the child, I didn't do anything. I just started work yesterday at 4 o'clock, and the kid came from behind and hit me. So you are right. Those who are going through some tough times,
Mm,
throughout my We Belong education consultancy, I hope I have always come across as advocate for educators first and
mm,
then children because I work with educators first. So for
mm,
you, I want to say that Helen's point has another flip side. That is
mm,
when we reflect of what I could have done or when we invest in lifelong learning habits,
mm.
chances are that you get offended less.
Yes.
That is, children will still do something that you have absolutely no responsibility about. Let's face it, you walk into a service and someone throws a ball at your face. You didn't do anything to deserve that.
Mm,
You don't even know the child's name. You were casually working at the service. You were called in the morning.
mm,
However, if you've been critically reflecting on or learning, the immediate reaction to that, because I walk into lots of services and I don't know
mm,
anybody's name.
mm,
And I do put myself in situations where I will get hit. People say, "Oh,
mm.
here's the kid, go talk to him." Yeah. But I take my time before I just walk to a child. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
because of the lifelong learning, it's just that has allowed me to um, react or respond to that slightly differently. Like
Mm,
immediately, because Helen, I'm going to go to how to communicate to parents very soon, but we are still at the what to
mm.
communicate.
Yeah.
Now, let's say if you've been doing lifelong learning, you get
Mm,
hit in the head by the ball on purpose by a child, on purpose by a child that you did not deserve or did anything to get it.
mm-hmm,
Y- I'm saying if you have reflected prior to that,
mm,
the way you respond is different, and therefore the what you would say to the parent is also going to be different.
mm,
And hey, Samantha, today, or hey, Helen, today, I got hit in the ball. I think I might have offended this kid somehow. I don't know what happened, but I'm trying to figure it out. And it only happened 10 minutes ago, and you just walked in. So, by the way, my name is Saurabh. I just got hit in the ball. And let's say the son's name is XYZ. Like XYZ hit. And I haven't had the chance to talk to him. Is it okay if I talk to him while you're here? Do you have a minute? Hey,
mm,
XYZ, sorry to say, but did I do something? Did something happen today?
mm,
That is how I respond to that thing. Now, 10 years ago, I would have said, who did this? How dare you do all of that?
mm,
So, what Helen is saying, if you hear that as, oh my God, they're not listening to me, trust me, when I say this, I would not be recording podcasts with Helen if I thought that Helen's heart is not in the right place and then she's not an advocate for an educator. Those
Oh.
who know me know
Mm,
that I'm an advocate for an educator. So
mm.
what you're going through is a tough battle. And I've already
Yes.
said we are on a
Mm,
losing battle because we didn't start this battle, and those who started it did not do well for us in the past.
mm,
Some of them did, and therefore we still exist, but many of them didn't, and many of them continue to not do the right thing.
mm. I mean, and I will back up that one of the reasons why I always say lifelong learner and why I'm such an advocate for PD and all that professional learning with educators, because we know sometimes, again, not no judgment, some services
Mhm.
are amazing and put their staff through umpteen PD sessions, whereas we know sometimes our frontline educators don't always get the same learning opportunities
They
as
don't.
others. But the reason I'm such an advocate for learning is because the more we know, with the different, we see things differently, we do differently,
Mm.
and that can change our lives. And like, I'm not saying I'm perfect because a little while ago I had the instance where I was with a preschool group and I knew what was going on. The child just, he was overstimulated. He didn't want to listen. He was crashing everything on the floor. And
Hmm.
I kind of walked up to him and I got down quietly and I just kind of said to him next to him, "Hey, do we want to start maybe picking up some of this mess?
Mhm.
Let's clean up together." And he turned around and said, "No, you fat pig." So to go, great. But then, just obviously communicating with that parent who I didn't know very well because I, at that time, was a prac
Communication,
student
trust.
in a preschool room. I
Mm.
just kind of went up to her and said, "Hey, I just need to let you know, um, today uh, things got a little bit wild. We were being quite destructive with all the equipment. And when I'd asked for help to tidy up, I was called a fat pig." And I knew that poor mother wanted to shrink and die and did not want to. She wanted the world to swallow her up. She didn't want to be standing there. But then I've got to say, this, the next day, he turned up with a beautifully made sorry card. It didn't say sorry, I called you a fat pig. It just said sorry. But
And the mother made him
but
do that anyway, so
but
he still
yeah,
doesn't
I've
know
got
what
to
he did.
say the reason I'm such an advocate for professional development and learning from lots of different people
Yeah, yeah.
because what um Saurabh has great PDs in behavior, critical reflection, and a whole lot more, but we've just labeled him as the behavior guy. But maybe you've reflected and you've decided that a play work approach is more appropriate. So you
Mm.
do some PD with any of the there's
Play workers, yeah.
quite a few
Like, and my
great play
mentors,
workers out
like
there.
I look at my colleagues, like when I meet my colleagues, those who are consulting people, yeah. Oftentimes we are like in so much of harmony. When I say often, always, so much of
Mm,
harmony of how we are approaching, and we see it's the diversification of approaches that we need to learn. When I say need to learn, again, it's not that I'm telling you, imposing something on you.
mm,
Look, my well-being, my emotional well-being has been in check because of continuous learning. If I
mm,
stopped learning that day when I got offended, or 3 months in a row, because even though I keep learning, children still say things to me. Okay, so it's not that they'll stop. "Oh, you have a PhD. Well, you're not a fat pig then. You're a good guy." No, they don't care. They will say the same thing to me if I had approached, and I'm sure Helen would have done everything right to approach
they
that
might
kid.
say to you, "You're not a real doctor."
Yeah, they might even say that. Don't worry about children. Even some adults say that. That's okay. I don't care. Now, I want to move on to the second aspect of it, how to
Mm,
communicate. Look, if the what is clear,
mm,
and when I say what, we haven't told you what is yet, because there are so many ways, perspective to understand children's behavior. We have not
mm,
touched the surface.
mm,
But because we were talking about the question of how to communicate to the parents, a little bit of what we touched on.
mm,
But if what is clear, then professionally speaking, this is a rehash of what I've written. If the what is clear,
mm,
today, due to peer culture, power dynamic, rejection happened, he used his power to win the game and he broke some rules. We need to talk about it. He was aggressive towards other kids. All of that did happen. Okay. We are not arguing it didn't happen, but that's what happened. But
mm,
you have conceptualized it in a very different way. You
mm,
have written it down quite differently either. You have not been accusatory, you have been explanatory. You
mm,
explain the behavior. But how
mm,
can you explain a behavior if you don't know the behavior either yourself? You just think A beat B. That's all we see. That's behavioral. But there are so many layers of what has occurred prior to that happening. Yeah. So for that, we have many podcasts which are coming up. Don't you worry about that. But how to do it? If you could, firstly, let's go back to those points. Create your professionalism with parents first.
mm,
Create who you are. Are you the advocate of children? Are you a lifelong learner talking to a parent? Are you
mm,
an advocate of children talking to a parent? Are you a professional talking to a parent? Are you talking to parents to put them to shame? Are you talking to parents to complain? Are you talking to parents to accuse someone?
mm,
Or are you someone who is committed for children's well-being, not just yours, children's well-being,
mm,
and you're committed to educator well-being,
mm,
and you believe that by certain actions these things can coexist?
mm,
You approach you approach a parent with that, having done the newsletter, having done the communication, having done all those things, you approach the parent and you say, even if you say the wrong thing, you'll get the right outcome. Don't worry about that. It's not about what you're saying, is who is saying.
Mm,
Who is talking is more important. Who
mm,
you are to them. And if the impression takes 2 months to build, well, then they have 2 months. How long are you thinking about working at your service or in this sector? I've been here for 18 years. So if 2 or 3 months could assist me, have 6 months.
mm,
But give me my decade of peace. Because once you start the culture of trust, communication, clarity, lifelong learning, and professionalism, what you would say to the parent would land differently. And some
mm,
parents will still not listen to you. For
mm.
that, you should have a parent code of conduct. That is,
Yes.
when you are speaking, they need to respond to you. If they are busy, that they respond to your email. Because you're looking after their, people say they're looking after their kids, right? So if somebody's looking after my car and if a mechanic wants to say something to me and I need to drive away, he will send me an email to, hey, sorry, with your car, these things that are still not done. We need another look at it or something.
Mm,
But people, if code of conduct is not written and not signed by the parent, parent don't have to respond to you. And I wonder why the parent of code of conduct is not written in the enrollment form, and why hasn't it been shown to the parents to say, look, if I'm talking, we talk,
mm.
and if you're busy, I'm sending an email. But please,
And I think we do need to acknowledge and just validate because, you know, we're just talking hypothetical scenarios. I'm sure there is some educators that maybe are listening to us right now and they're kind of maybe they're driving and they're clutching that steering wheel really tightly and they're just thinking, Helen and Saurabh, you crazy people. I have tried building relationships. I constantly critically reflect,
mm,
and this parent still comes in super aggressive.
mm,
We know sometimes we can try everything and it's not going to work.
mhm,
But I think for me as an educator, as long as I know I am always trying to do my best, that's all
mhm.
I can do.
Yeah. And you just mentioned a good point too, and we are coming to the end of this
Mm,
podcast, but I haven't. If you do, you have your area manager, your director, your someone in the team who also can communicate with you? Because if you're
mm,
the only one going to the parent already doesn't want to talk to you, well, then you need
mm,
someone else in your team to say, hey, look, let's say if I work with you, Helen, I'd say, hey, XYZ, I think that Helen has been trying to communicate to you for a few things. Is it okay if we have a chat?
mm.
And if I can't advocate for my staff, again, I keep going back to advocacy for educators.
Yep.
If a leader at your outside school care, or USH or long day care or in school
Mm,
feels that they are the only one because I'm a leader, so now I have to talk to the parents, but the parent doesn't want to talk to me, well, then you need someone else also from your organization to come and assist you.
yes.
Parent code of conduct, have organized someone, but what to communicate is still important. Don't have all these people backing you up to accuse a parent. It's
Mm.
not gonna work.
Not
Don't
a
have all
lynch
these
mob.
people. Don't have all these people lining up to say this parent, this kid hurt my feelings. You are right. This
Mm,
kid did hit the ball, but it didn't hit your feelings.
mm,
Hey, we will talk about that second. I'm not demeaning the feelings because I talk about emotions a lot, but I'm just talking about there's a difference between behavior, thoughts, and emotions.
mm,
Okay, so again, that's a different topic altogether. But do you have? So here's the core strategies, I guess. What is happening? Documented.
mm,
Oh, this thumbs up sign. What is happening? Documented. Secondly, critically reflect. Did that actually happen, or is that your perspective of what happened?
mm,
Third, talk to the parents, having built communication,
mm,
communicate with them what you believe happened and what you
mm,
see is the solution because you're a professional. The parent doesn't listen to you, show them parent code of conduct. He still doesn't
mm,
listen to you, have someone else in your team come in. These are the sequence of events I'm trying to draw a timeline in. Okay.
mm,
And then that is a 2 to 3 months process because I'm sure you've been abused by a parent. I've been abused by a parent. The parent said once that I want to chop his head off. That's what's
oh,
told to me in a parent advisory committee.
mm,
I feel like I want to chop his head off. And my supervisor, like someone who was a head above me, I went to a child and I was having a chat again to the same child. And when the parent said something negative to me, I called my
mm,
supervisor. And I said, hey, this happened. You know what my supervisor said? My supervisor said, didn't I tell you not to talk to the parent? And that is what I don't want your supervisor to say, because
Mm,
I felt so alone in that time. I'm like,
yeah.
but I had to talk to the parent because it was an emergency. I couldn't have let not. And I know I have huge respect for that supervisor. So if that supervisor is listening or your supervisors are listening, they may say, no, no, Saurabh, I said it for a reason. Of course, dynamics are different. So I'm not saying you can't say those exact words. You can. But I'm saying how I felt having heard that word.
Mm. I
So
think
I'm just,
also just a quick side note because I know we're winding up, but um, just as we know, children learn differently. Some respond really well to verbal, some
mhm.
need visual cues. Also consider in your parent communication. Do you're communicating verbally and it's not working. Maybe a few follow-up emails.
Yeah.
Just emailing you to further discuss those points from today.
Mhm.
We are seeing ABC. Um, please let me know if you've got any advice on how on
Yeah.
maybe some things we can try. Like not again, not combative. We're
Yeah.
trying to get that two-way open communication going, but just also considering if the way you're communicating isn't working again, little always that word critically reflect.
Yeah.
Why is it working? Maybe I need to try something different. Maybe, in the world in the world of TikTok, maybe eventually we'll be sending each other TikToks. Hey, I saw this. What do you think? No, but
If it
think
doesn't get
about
banned in
maybe
Australia, but that's okay. Yeah. I have a mind map of things which, and I believe that I should just, we should ask our listeners to send us a mind map of what they learn. Anyone, if they're interested, please. But I have a mind map of what I learned today, and
Mhm.
that would be it, unless we come up with a different point. But the mind map that I've drawn on my book, as Helen was talking and ideas kept coming, and these are just words on the mind map. They're not connected necessarily as
Mm,
a sequence, but they're just words. Shame among parents,
mm,
anger among parents,
mm,
liability among parents, professionalism among educators,
mm,
peer culture among children, trust through communication, and connection is the conduit to that
mhm,
communication.
mm,
Helen also said about data. As you are gathering data, you noticing that's what Helen did when she was talking, when she was observing that child for a prolonged period of time, not just one day. She was observing that child for a bit, and she went to the parent. Due to the communication, the parent had opened up.
mm,
A researcher. If we are researching, parents needs to know that we are researching. And then the last 2 points were figure out what to say before we say how to say it.
mm,
Because even if you're nice and we don't know what is actually occurring, we just have one word, aggressive behavior or disrespectful behavior or undesirable behavior, or like these words, they're not wrong words, but if they are the repeated words, if they happen like 2, 3 more times, maybe we'll just be talking to deaf ears because they want to hear more thing and more things such as, we talked about it, peer culture, dynamic, discourse, power,
mm,
and how to say it. We have some strategies, and Helen mentioned multiple ways of communication if one doesn't work. Code of
mm,
conduct, parent code of conduct is another thing to support you, and get some other people, or some other personnel from your organization to assist you
mm.
with that communication if what you're doing is not working. And final call of help, contact We Belong Education, because I have so many dynamics, and
Mm,
those who are, if you're driving, you're clenching your fist like, oh, you didn't cover that point, right? Or those who are listening and thinking, but he didn't cover that point. Think about this. How many points you did not know, or I didn't know that we're going to talk about these points either, right?
no,
How many points that we brought up, but we did
mm,
not discuss? Think about that.
mm,
How many points there are that we bring up every day in our lives, but we don't have time to discuss? And that's why, after having visited so many services, sometimes I have no words to say because I'm like, where do I start? So contact us to tell me exactly what you're having at your service,
mm.
and maybe we can organize a visit or something. Helen, thank you very much. Helen, what's your view? What's your take? Is there something I missed? Something that you want to add?
My view actually just backs up exactly what you said that this is a very conversational podcast. We don't often, well, sorry, we do have an idea of what we think we're going to talk about, but I thought most of today was going to be filled with talking about behavior as communication. That
Hmm.
didn't happen, so that'll be a
Yeah.
podcast for the future. Thank you to that educator that sent in that
Anika.
point. Sorry, what was her name? Annika.
Anika.
Because this is what we want. We want to talk about things that are relevant to the people that are listening to us.
Mm,
And even sometimes you may say, hey, you started talking about this and then got sidetracked because we do that too.
mm.
Send it and say, hey, can you talk a bit more on that? Because we want to hear what people want to hear from us.
Yeah.
Also, the conversations don't have to stop just when our podcast's finished because we have quite a few mechanisms now to talk. Saurabh has his We Belong on Facebook. You can watch
Instagram.
multiple videos on Saurabh's YouTube. We have we
Helen
both
with.
have We Belong Instagrams. We have two We Belong, which is Saurabh's official one. I have We Belong with Helen on Instagram. And we now also have a TikTok. My kids still need to just instruct us on what to do. We're not that great on it. If you're good at TikTok, also let us know
Yeah.
because we don't know how to use it.
Yes, exactly. And thank you very much for our listeners. Uh, yeah, I don't have many more words to say, but from Dr. Saurabh Malviya and Helen
Oh,
Pentecost, it's a goodbye. This is the first
goodbye,
of many.
Dr. Malviya.
It's a goodbye from us, and look after yourself and the people you love. Have a good
Thank
day.
you for listening to us.
Bye.